This is Jason Verney's podcast. I am Jason Verney. As some of you are aware, or those listeners who have been listening for a while, this podcast is essentially named or dubbed Flicks, or at least it's the combination of the letters F-L-I-C-K-S. And the reason for this, behind this decision, was so that every letter would actually represent something I will speak about, I will interview someone about, I will talk to you about. And the first one is films, hence the F, and then it goes on to life, interviews, camera, which essentially is the filmmaking side of what I do, Korea, as in South Korea, North Korea, and sounds, which is essentially to represent music. But this particular episode is regarding a film. It's a documentary about a Korean indie band, and so for the sake of what category does this fit into, really it comes into the Korea, the Korea element, because it's South Korea. It's also a film, and it's also sounds, as in music. I know you could say it's also filmmaking, but it's not my filmmaking, but it is something I'm very interested in. Documentary making is something I do, whether it's on the small scale or the longer term projects that I've got going on. So this film is it's called Bamseom Pirates Seoul Inferno. Now I'll spell this to you in the romanization way of so that using the English characters of the Hangul, the Korean language letters, or the alphabet rather. So it's a Bamseom. So if you want to look this up, it's B-A-M, M for mother, S-E-O-M, M for mother again. So it's Bamseom, but it's probably pronounced Bamseom. So it's Bamseom Pirates. That's the name of the band. They were around a few years ago. They became very prominent for various reasons, I believe. But the actual film is called Bamseom Pirates Seoul Inferno, because the band was Bamseom Pirates, but it's just there might be other meaning to this, but it's Seoul Inferno is just it's kind of the name, the wacky name for this music documentary. It's actually, I've actually seen this film, and I'll give that a little review, but still leaving a lot to be discovered by yourself if you decide to see it. Whether it's online legally, legally online somewhere. I don't think it's on iTunes yet, but it's somewhere. Eventually, it'll be available. But the main reason I'm recording this now is because currently the London Korean Film Festival is up and running. It's been going for over a week now, around 10 days even. And there's a film on Sunday evening, which is this film, Bamseom Pirates. And not only that, accompanying the screening, it's 7:30 p.m. The actual screening, and it's in a lovely venue called the Close Up Cinema in Shoreditch, and it's actually really easy to get to. It sounds a bit out of the way, but once you're on the overland, or even from another stop that you managed to get there, if you were to come off at the overland station at Shoreditch High Street, it's literally just a very short walk away. It's almost where Rich Mix is, if you've ever been there, but it's the road that forks off the other direction. Anyway, so Close Up Cinema. But the good thing about this particular screening on Sunday evening is that it features a Q&A with the director. When I saw this film, which was not that long ago, several weeks ago, just actually a few less than several, a few weeks ago at the London Film Festival, the BFI London Film Festival, because it was actually playing there as well. I didn't have the pleasure of having, being in the company of the director or a Q&A, But if you go to see this, of course you will do. So let's just. I'm going to run through this film in from the notes I made after watching it, and it's a funny film. It's a bit of a political film because they were kind of making statements. Although when questioned in the film, regarding some of their reasonings, it did seem a bit sort of they were doing it just for the hell of it, and maybe they weren't sure. But again, maybe I misunderstood that. But either way, they were definitely a wacky kind of outfit, if you like, that existed, and they're still well known in South Korea. I say South Korea, but there was a song they released which was regarding North Korea and the leader there. So that caused some, I don't want to use the word tension, especially because we use the word tension to say when the media likes to talk about North and South Korea. But I mean, it caused some sort of hype in the press and whatever. And but yeah, I'll come on to that. So the film itself, it's quite a long film. It's over 2 hours. Is it 2.5 hours? I can't remember exactly the time, but it's quite a long film. It's so much so that I really wanted to review it. I was making mental notes of the various aspects of the films as it went along, and then I thought, actually, this is getting a bit too much to take in and to recall and to take on board. So I almost didn't review it. But this is that sort of review or mini review, whatever you want to call this, or my diagnosis of the film, or so not diagnosis, my analysis of the film, I suppose, is best way to explain what this is. So the film begins with a shaky sort of real footage, real sort of gritty video footage of the band. I think there's a load of broken things because it's kind of known before you go and see this film, or at least it's in the synopsis, so you can read up on it, that these bands, they break up stuff, or they break up, rather than break up things like guitars and that, I think they were known for breaking up things of rubbish and things that already maybe there is a broken. Anyway, so you see footage of stuff that's broken. It's kind of very shaky footage, and then not before long, there's some giant colourful lyrics on the screen as the film really begins. The lyrics come up in Hangul, Korean, that is, and English. As I say, they're bright. They're upon us in colour. They're in our faces, and in pretty astounding, I would say, design. Even though it's basic design, but because of that, it's quite bold. And maybe it's the font, and maybe it's the shape of the characters. So, yeah. Then we are. Then not long after that, we are shown the band. They are performing, or at least they're miming a song. Literally, they're just miming. They're not actually singing anything. I think there's music playing, but they're miming, and almost silent playing. I think I think it is completely silence, and they're just kind of playing as if they're kind of miming that they're as if they were playing. It's to a crowd in Seoul, and it's amusing to us, the audience. Anyway, the first glimpse of them in, if you want to say actually in action. And soon we are on to the subject of the North Korean song I mentioned. Some great footage of that. Stock. I'm imagining it's stock footage or from YouTube or whatever, but it's some really good footage. The director of this film has really put a lot of work into this documentary. And it goes, it sort of it elaborates on what happens between their lyrics about North Korea and the North Korean leader. There's obviously a little segment of the film that basically speaks about that. They have some interesting lyrics in there in the future scenes where they're saying privatize their bodies. So the lyrics kind of it's almost like the lyrics indicating how privatization is perhaps a bad. It could be a bad or a good thing, but it's the way they're using the word privatize their bodies. Now, please bear in mind that, of course, whenever I speak about things that are said in a foreign film, it's normally from the subtitles. So there's often some abbreviation or slight distortion of what the real words in Korean were. That's sometimes just for space on the screen for subtitles or for ease of reading. And it might have been spot on, privatize their bodies, but there was more to it than that. But that's quite a funny thing in itself. And then at a gig, they're kind of talking to the audience as people do at gigs, at the start of gigs, and then they announce. This is probably one of the funniest parts of the film. Very brief, but they tell the crowd that chit chat was actually our show. They say those words before our show were actually our show, and thanks for coming. So in other words, I think people already knew they had a bit of a following for doing crazy stuff, and I mean, it probably wouldn't be that surprising just to have some words and no music and almost maybe avant-garde or something. So there's some great elements like that in the film. Soon we are introduced to them going to somewhere that I've been to actually on three occasions, and I've mentioned it on another podcast or a few of them. I've been to Kang Joong. Now, Kang Joong is actually a tiny part of Jeju Island, so it's not only South Korea. I always call Jeju south of South Korea, and this is actually south of the island. This is Kang Joong. They go there because they're kind of making political statements. There was a North Korean song and all this and all other things that they're mentioning about Korean politics, whether tongue-in-cheek or not. They then go there, and they go to the place where I've been, and I see all the scenery. It's the same. There's people that are in Kang Joong still protesting the Navy base that's happening there. It's been 10 years in the making, and it's pretty much complete now. But people are daily protesting for that against that naval base, and it's happening in Okinawa and other places in the world. US and other big corporations are involved, using it as an excuse to protect. The excuse is to protect from North Korea, but essentially there's more to it than that. But it's interesting because although that's kind of, you'd think this band is what they do, this is what they stand for. They're actually in a room where they're staying in Kang Joong. It wouldn't actually surprise me if it's exactly where I stayed. There's a village hall which has rooms occasionally. It often has rooms where people can stay. They're very much kind of hostel type rooms, some of them. And they were saying that they felt they weren't sure why they came there because they didn't feel that they were pure enough for this cause. So in other words, it's all well and good them shouting to people in Seoul about this, that, and maybe they just felt like they're not as pure at heart, either as activists or just at the for the cause itself. I mean, you could read that as two or three different things there, I suppose, but that they. It's actually a nice little segment of the film, and there's a great long shot of the peace banners that Kang Joong have, the various banners that they have that I've seen. I've actually seen myself loads. I've got loads of footage of it myself, and it's kind of a night shot, and you would kind of we it's almost like we crane along these banners. And it almost seems to go on forever, all with different words, and the translation is there for many of them. On the screen, the subtitles come up. Incidentally, if you're interested in checking out what Kang Joong is about, I keep calling it Kang Joong, but it's spelt it's spelt in more than one way, but the most common spelling of this village on Jeju that has all these issues is spelt like this, which is G-A-N-G, and that's J-E-O-N-G. So it's Gang and Joong. So G-A-N-G-J-E-O-N-G. Sometimes people spell it with a K at the beginning instead of a G. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that in case you've heard me mention this a couple of times and you want to learn more about what's happening there. There's also, again, whilst they're there, I believe this is whilst they're there, they're kind of almost called North Korean sympathisers. And we've all heard this before. People are... Even I worry sometimes things that are said on Facebook and wherever, and people are just, they're trying not to have some crazy American leader blow up North Korea, and you sort of say that's not the way to go about it. And as much as their country has issues, that the people there are, getting treated, we don't really know the truth of how everything there in North Korea. But anyway, I don't want to... I don't want to dwell on that too much, but they are in the film. They are, at one point, they are kind of almost, people are calling them that for things. I'm not even sure if it's because they're in Kang Joong and they're kind of going against what this whole Navy base is meant to be for, and protection from North Korea. There's about 80 THAAD bases, THAAD, missile defence systems all over South Korea, which again, they're not even tested, and they're there, and there's various excuses for them being there. But I'm not sure if this band is actually being, if they're being called North Korean sympathisers for that, or maybe they've also added that to the fact that they had a song about the North Korean leader, so they put two and two together, or one and one together. But it did interest me because that particular part is almost like there was a big uprising and mass killing on Jeju around the time of the Second World War and the Korean War, and around that time, and there's the 4-3 uprising killings, and the reason that happened, the Japanese and Americans, and the reason they decided to do that was simply because they labelled the people on the island that were being picked on, I suppose you could say, as North Korean sympathisers or communists, and that was a good enough reason to kill them, which is insane. But communists, it's not. It's just, again, because of that they were. It reminded me of these people are on Jeju in Kang Joong, and the Jeju Uprising, which happened, I'd say many years ago, but it's still horrific when people think about the loss of lives that were just basically culled from the island, burnt. So yeah, they didn't find that their visit to Kang Joong was that successful, or it didn't feel right. So we then go back to Seoul, and there's about 150 thugs that are tormenting activists or free speechers. And this free speech thing plays a big part in the film, it seems. And I guess the film itself, this film is free speech of certain elements in Korean society, or in the world society, really. There's also, it was interesting for me because I've seen this band live in Korea, Danpyeon and the Sailors. Sorry, Dan Pyun-sun and the Sailors. And the guy, Dan Pyun-sun, that's his three names, sort of his full name, is kind of merged into one for the song, for the group title, Dan Pyun-sun and the Sailors. It's interesting to find he was quite a central character in this. He was friends with the band. He was quite involved with the band in this film. These few things I'm just going to mention now as I kind of bring this to a close, because I wanted to sort of review this film in a sort of mixed way, where I'm telling you, explain the style as well as parts that connect to things that I've learnt about Korea, and also the causes that are happening, the good causes that, or the causes that need to be fought, and that's not just in Korea, wherever in the world. But the band themselves, their style, looked kind of sort of very different musically. It did remind me of a band that I've really got into lately, who are no longer together, but they're called Muki Muki Man Man Zoo. And they might not be as melodic as Muki Muki Man Man Zoo, but Bamseom Pirates, they reminded me of that. There was a female duo, actually, with their experimentation and their political lyrics. I'm not sure how the political Muki Muki Man Man Zoo lyrics were, but I get the impression they were making statements anyway. The film does slow down sort of 2/3 of the way through. I think it's about that length, and then it returns to form later on. I mean, it kind of slows down, but necessarily so, because it's going pretty fast and quite insane. It needs to have some sort of explanation and some sort of breakdown of events and interviews and what have you. But some of the videos in the film, they kind of act as music videos, and maybe they were even the music videos themselves for the band. But it's almost towards the end, these videos get much better and much more seem to be better quality. Now it's almost, I was thinking to myself that unless these were the band's original videos, I was actually thinking it almost felt like the filmmakers were suddenly given or somehow crowdfunded enough money or extra money to finish off the film, and they decided to make their music videos more flashy and more stylish. That was just something that came to me whilst watching it. Then we have a bit of controversy as well. There was a retweeted post about North Korea. The Park, one of the band members, I believe, he retweeted a post, and there was a lot of discussion regarding that because it was just a retweet from a Twitter account that's well known to be actually North Korean, or at least comes via North Korea. It's almost a North Korean Twitter account. So again, it goes back to freedom of speech. Is there no freedom of speech whatsoever? Someone should be allowed to retweet someone else's. The tweet's already there. Just because they retweet it doesn't actually make them any connection to that. I could retweet something of somebody I've never even met or had any association with, but it doesn't have. This went to court, and there was a mass. This part of the film is it's quite a long bit of the film. I suppose it's the best way of explaining that part. But yeah, it wasn't just that particular individual. The band as well is about freedom of speech, as I've said before. So yeah, as I said, the film seems to get flashier near the end. But they definitely had a unique style, and people that I've mentioned this film to, Koreans, one or two, they've heard of it, or they've I guess they had some sort of, I mean, even with that controversy with the Twitter account, I'm sure that would have been in, if not newspapers, then in the TV at the time. So even a band as controversial as this, they might have even been known for this stuff more than their music even. But I'm just making assumptions there. So that's pretty much it. Bamseom Pirates Seoul Inferno. That's just my kind of breakdown of the film, or at least points that I took away from it. What it was. So London Korean Film Festival is still going on. The London Korean Film Festival, incidentally, finishes on the 8th of November, but that's only in London. Then it tours the UK in various cities. You can go to koreanfilm.co.uk. So it's koreanfilm.co.uk. That's obviously it's www. that has the full schedule and everything relating to the directors and the various Q&As and the venues, because there's various venues involved. You can also go to mini-movie.com. So mini-movie.com. That's my website, which also has some details about this. Has a couple of articles on there at the moment. One about the full schedule, one that's going to be there very soon about the closing gala film that's going to be upon us soon, and also one about the film noir section, which is playing the same weekend as this film actually. So Sunday Saturday the 4th and Sunday the 5th, the film noir section. But this particular film I mentioned is the end of Sunday. One other thing, talking about venues, which are in various venues, as the London Korean Film Festival is in various venues in London. The one I mentioned that this particular film is in, I actually had the pleasure of going there to see a Bae Chang-ho film, because he was actually here. He's in the classic season. Great film, People in the Slums. But the actual venue I've never been to before, the one in Shoreditch I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, it's called Close Up Cinema, and it's beautiful. It's small. Well, it's bigger than you'd think, because you go in. There's a nice little bar area, nice little. It feels, once you look in the other rooms, you almost feel like you're surrounded by DVDs. There's a DVD, Asian film, loads of those, Korean film, loads of other films that you can hire out, and you can have membership, various different levels. Downstairs there's more, and there's a separate, of course, it's a close-up cinema, so there is actually a screening room, 4 or 5 rows of seats, lovely cozy cinema. It's beautiful. But yeah, close-up cinema it's called. And I think that's it. I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. But as with any film, whenever I watch it, even if I watch it again, there's always going to be stuff I pick up on. This is something I really wanted to get down, not get down on paper, but get down on, not get down with the music, but get down on a recording, because I really wanted to express how good this film is, even if you miss it this time. I mean, yeah, there won't be that many chances to see it unless, I'm talking about officially. I'm sure it will be. I'm sure I'm sure it'll be on certain video outlets. It won't be on. I don't think it'll be on Netflix. It might be in time, but it'll be hopefully on one of those platforms. But that could be sometime, if at all. Otherwise, it's seeing it somewhere in Korea, maybe in South Korea. So I will leave it at that. I'm going to say farewell, and I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Feel free to leave any comments on YouTube, if YouTube is where you listen to this. It's also available on iTunes, so you can subscribe there. And so that's it. I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have a good day wherever you are. And from Jason, I will say goodbye to you all. Okay? Adios.